Hey guys. All right, so we've got a new note sheet here, and for this part, I'm gonna just do a video, and I'm gonna fill in the notes that you guys have in front of you, so you guys can follow along with my voice and then fill in what I write. So we just had a warm up where you guys had to identify which of our three methods you want to use to solve. Um, Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys some notes here to sort of explain if you're still a little bit lost on which method to use. We're going to talk about how do you know which method is best. So let's read this. When solving a system of linear equations, it's important to be able to figure out when to use each of the methods in order to be able to solve. So, first off, what would the system look like in order for graphing to be the best method to use? All right, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. So what would it look like if we wanted to use graphing? Well, we know that graphing is easiest if we don't have to put anything in y equals mx plus b form first. So let's say that if both equations, oh man, this is not writing well. If both equations are already in y equals mx plus b form. So if both equations are already in y equals mx plus b, that says form. Form, there we go. Then we want to use graphing. Okay, so what about substitution? What do we want it to look like in order to use substitution? Let's try and do this. We'll be a savvy user here. What would the system look like in order for substitution to be the best method to use? Okay, so now for substitution. Remember, substitution is easiest if one of the equations is already in y equals or x equals form. So let's write that. Let's make this a little smaller. How about that? One of the equations, sorry about the handwriting, guys, is already in x equals or y equals form. All right, so there we go. One of the equations is already in x equals or y equals form. That's when we know we want to use substitution. Okay. So how about this last one? Elimination. When do we want to use elimination? So basically elimination is if we don't have either of those. We don't have an x equals, we don't have a y equals, and so what's left is what we call standard form. So let's write this out. If both equations are in standard, now you guys haven't heard this, but I'm going to explain it in just a second. Standard form. Okay, so write that down. If both equations are in standard form, we want to use elimination method. But what does standard form mean? So let's do this again. Standard form basically just means that x and y are on the same side. So a standard form might look something like 2x plus 3y equals 10 or something like that. And so since x and y are on the same side, that's standard form. If both equations look like this, then we want to go ahead and use the elimination method. Okay, so let's look at these. So this says determine which method is the best method to use for each of the following systems. Write the method underneath each of the systems. You do not have to solve the system. So let's look at this first one example right here. And I'll just talk through it. So I look and I see I've got a y equals, and I've also got a standard form. And so let's look through our options. I could do graphing, but that doesn't look quite right because for graphing I want both to be in y equals, and now I only have one in y equals. Elimination would be good if they're both in standard, but I see that I have one in y equals and one in standard. So if I have one in y equals and one in standard, it looks like substitution. So substitution, we said one of the equations is already in x equals or y equals form. We see that's true with this one right here. So we're going to go ahead and use substitution. Substitution, and I wrote it huge, so we'll just make it a little smaller. How about that? Okay, now this second one right here. Now it looks like I've got both equations in standard form. So remember, standard form is this thing right here. If both of them are in standard form, then I know automatically that I want to use elimination. All right, let's make that one smaller again. Cool, elimination. Now this last one, both are in y equals form. Remember, I said if both equations are already in y equals form, look, if both equations are already in y equals form, then, I'll undo that. I know that I want to use graphing. Graphing. Okay, so that concludes the notes part. Now what you guys have is some practice. So if you look ahead, we've got example 1, example 2, example 3. We've got a bunch of examples. You guys need to be working on those. You can work with the person next to you, no big groups. Work with the person next to you. When you get an answer, the sub is going to get volunteers to write their answers on the board. He has a key, so he can tell you whether you're right or wrong. After that, you'll have homework. All right. Thanks for listening. Have a great day, guys.